Hi, I am Sam Horn. I'm the founder and CEO of the Intrigue agency. I'm also the author of Pop and Tung Fu and the Washington Post bestseller Got Your Attention. So, my quick question is, what is something you care about? And we're going to talk about how you can get people's eyebrows up so they're intrigued and they want to know more. And the worst advice I ever got was always be closing.
Ooh, I hate that advice too. Always be closing. Wow. I don't know. So who told you that advice? How long ago was that, and why is it so bad in your business?
You know what? It was told to me almost 30 years ago, Phil, and it was a sales job that I had right out of college, and it was really interesting because it plants the seed that people are targets and that they are a means to our end, and that our goal is to convert them, is to get what we want regardless of what they want. I think that flies in the face of how you and I want to be, right?
Yeah, absolutely it does. Yeah, converting them, that's not it, right? I would totally want to connect with them. I believe that with all my heart. I believe in the ABC of always be connecting. So, and I know you do too. So that's great. I'm glad that, especially in a sales job where often that is how we're measured, and yet that isn't how we open conversations. I mean, you talked about making our eyebrows go up. So talk to me about how we can open a conversation and make people lift their eyebrows up a little bit and pay attention.
Good. I'll jump right into an example because I know you and I both believe in examples instead of infobesity, right?
Absolutely.
I had a chance to speak at Inc. 500 and I gave a session on how to disrupt the traditional elevator speech. Because do you know anyone who likes to listen to a speech? So here's the story, and then we'll have a technique that everyone watching and listening can actually apply to the next time someone says, "What do you do?" Sound good?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we were talking about how to disrupt this, and here is Colleen, the Entrepreneur of the Year for Oklahoma. So I said, "What do you do?" Wah, 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 wah. 2 minutes later, Phil, no one in that room had any idea what she did, and she was the CEO. Think of the lost opportunities, right? I mean, these are the best entrepreneurs in the country, and no one's going to walk up to her afterwards. No one's going to recommend her because they have no idea what she does. So I said, "Can we play?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "From now on, never explain what you do. Explanations are infobesity." I said, what are the results of what you do that we can see or smell or taste or touch?" And she said something about magnetic resonating imaging devices and so forth. I said, "Do you run the medical centers that offer MRIs and CAT scans?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Great. Don't tell people that. Because if people say, 'What do you do?' and you say, 'I run the medical centers that offer,' they're going to go, 'Oh.'" And it's the end of the conversation. We don't want to end the conversation. We want to open the conversation. So I said, turn it into a three-part question. Do you know anyone, could be yourself, a friend, or someone at work, who's had an MRI or a CAT scan? She said, "What's this about a three-part question?" I said, if you ask, "Have you ever had an MRI CAT scan?" That's an interrogation. There's something called the evolution of intimacy. And our goal is to ask instead of tell. This gives them control over the conversation. You know, Amy Poehler said, "I get a little itchy if I don't have some kind of control." And you see, if we ask, "Do you know anyone?" Could be yourself, a friend, or a family member, they get to go where they want with the conversation. And we just increase the likelihood they have some experience with what we do. So they may say, "Well, I never have, but my daughter has. She hurt her knee playing soccer and she had an MRI." Well, now we link what we do to what they just said. "Oh, I run the medical facilities that offer MRIs like the one your daughter had when she hurt her knee playing soccer." Phil, do you see? We turned a monologue into a dialogue in 60 seconds. Both people are talking. We've already customized what we do in a way that's relevant for that person so they relate to it all in 60 seconds.
That's incredible. That's a big shift of what we hear and often say when people ask us what we do. So let's step through that, right? The three parts. is helping people get that it's not just them, right? That it's got to be, could be them, as you said, their friend or a family member.
Yeah.
Makes that really easy. You ask a question and then you connect it. Is that the three parts? Am I getting that right, Sam?
The three parts is ask a three-part question. Guess what the second part is, Phil?
What's that?
Listen.
I
Oh
can
my
do that.
God. Because it's tell, tell, tell. It's like I do this and this and this, and people are going, get me out of here. So it's like our goal is to stop talking in the first 30 seconds to give them an opportunity to talk once again about their experience or how they relate to it, whatever. And then the third is to link what we do to what they just said. So you want another example? Because I agree with you. Let's unpack this so people can replicate it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's do one more.
Okay, so I'm speaking for YPO in Dublin, Ireland. Now, here's another reason why this works. This guy said, I'm going to tell you something that I don't talk about very often. I'm an introvert. He said, I'm actually kind of shy, even though I'm a CEO. He said, I flew across an ocean and a country to get here, and then I hang out in my hotel room because I run this tech company. It's so complicated. No one ever gets it. It's always awkward. I just avoid hall conversations. And it's another reason why this works is because for many people, they think what I do is hard to understand and people don't get it and it's awkward. So we get off on the wrong foot. So here's what we did. The three steps. Number one, I said, what are the results of what you do that we can see or smell or taste or touch? And he said something about computers and financial software and credit cards, and my light bulb went off. I said, do you make the software that makes it safe for us to buy things online? He said, yes. I said, don't tell that to people. Ask, do you know anyone, could be yourself, a friend, someone at work, who buys stuff online? Now, I said, do you want to stack the deck and almost guarantee that anyone you talk to is going to be relate to what you do? He said, is that a rhetorical question? I said, what are the three top online retailers right now? And at that time, it was Amazon and Travelocity and eBay. I like Travelocity, eBay, or Amazon. Do you see how we're increasing the likelihood? We're planting the seed. People can jump on that bandwagon of an idea, right? Now, put a sock in it. And they're going to say, I hate that stuff, but my wife's on Amazon all the time. She loves the free shipping. Guess what we do? Link what we do to what they just said. Because see, that's the connection, right? That's why this is an elevator connection and a conversation rather than an elevator speech. Oh, I make the software that makes it safe for your wife to buy things online. Boom.
Wow. So very simple, so very clear, and yet so very connected. I love that. That helps a lot, right? For those that are listening and thinking, how do I flip that? So ask the question, right? Shut your mouth and then connect. We can do that. That is awesome. So Sam, I've been reading your books and your articles and stuff for a long while, and I'm delighted that we get to talk today. Well, one of the questions though that I've got to ask is tongue fu. Like, where did that come from? Because that is so funny. Like, that's where I was first introduced to your work. I can't even remember how long ago, and I was like, that's both clever, funny, and it totally makes sense. So where did you get the inspiration for that title, and how has that served you in your work?
I'm going to give a story because we're talking about sales and we're talking about connecting and so forth. And Phil, I think it all starts with an original organic story. And that's how we come up with original content and disruptive approaches that people haven't heard before. So here's the story behind that. Dr. Ray Oshiro of University of Hawaii had asked me to do a course on conflict resolution. So I called it Dealing with Difficult People Without Becoming One Yourself. Now, that's a pretty good title, right? It's got that iambic meter. When you put it in a beat, you make it easy to repeat. So it's a good title. Now, at the first break, there was a gentleman, and he didn't even get up to get some fresh air or get a cup of coffee. He just sat there gazing off into space. I'm curious. And I went over, I said, what are you thinking? He said, Sam, I'm a real estate broker. He said, I deal with some very demanding and arrogant people, and they seem to think they can treat me any way they want to. I'm tired of it. He said, I thought you were going to teach us some zingers to fire back at people and put them in their place. He said, that's not what this is about, is it? And I assured him, our goal is not to put people in their place. It's to put ourselves in their place so that we can respond with compassion instead of contempt. Now, he's the one who said, I'm a student of martial arts. He said, I studied karate, taekwondo, judo. He said, what you're talking about is like a verbal form of kung fu, isn't it? Eureka, the perfect name, Tung Fu. And now here's why that's an even better title, because I know that many of your people, they're, what do I title my book? What do I title my presentation? What do I title my business? Is that dealing with difficult people without becoming one yourself? It's a great blog title. I use it in the book. Sometimes I call my talks that. However, if you Google it, there's millions of people talking about difficult people, aren't there, Phil? Yeah. You know, I would have been one of many instead of one of a kind. I would have blended in instead of broke out. And we don't want to blend in. That's for Cuisinarts. So Tung Fu is a one of a kind title. You know, I trademark that, which is why I can certify people around the world in that. It's that if a meeting planner is trying to decide between 100 different speakers, all on conflict resolution and so forth, maybe they're going to go with the one-of-a-kind name that also has an international track record of all these years. So that's how I came up with that title. And it's also, if people watching start listening to what's being said around them, that one-of-a-kind title, if it gets their eyebrows up, could help them break out instead of blend in.
That's so interesting that came from, almost kind of came from somebody else. By listening, one of the most important ways that we can connect is listening. So I dig that. So with that, Sam, how did you get started in this? I'm very curious. I mean, you everything that you've said like obviously has a purpose, right? I mean, you're very articulate and you have very clear, clean words that just make sense. And there's always a phrase that pays somewhere in there that I'm like, ooh, I can write that one down, right? So that's a tweetable, or hey, that's a good Instagram post, or that. So how did you get started with this?
I believe in making our life our lab, and that the world is our material. If we, as Mary Oliver said, pay attention, which is our endless and noble work. And if we then riff off what happens and turn it into a positioning or a messaging or a topic or a phrase or an approach that people have not heard before that is replicable so they can actually do it. It's not just, oh, that's a great idea. No, it's how can I act on that, apply it, right? So here's, once again, 60-second story, right, Phil? Because that's where the originality is. Then we riff off the originality and craft it and coin it so it's concise and so it pops. So I think you know that I helped start and run the Maui Writers Conference for 17 years. Writers Digest said it was the best writers conference in the world. So at the first year, I'm running around to make sure everything's on time, and I pop into Michael Larson's session. Now, Michael Larson wrote the book on how to get an agent, how to do a book proposal. He runs the San Francisco Writers Conference, and he was talking about the importance of titles. And someone in the audience said, you just said that you actually book a client based on a title even before they have a book? And he said, yeah, because books sell, or titles sell books. And the person in the audience said, well, like, what's an example of a great title? And he said, Tung Fu is the best title I've heard in 10 years. Phil, I went out and I plopped in a chair because, of course, that was my title. Now, I was speaking on it. However, I had 2 young sons who had time to write a book. And my epiphany was, the more I speak, the more I'll speak. If I want to be a visionary on behalf of my career, I will write a quality book, because that will be a pebble in the pond of my legacy. It will drive business in an evergreen way more than 3 more months of paid speaking. Well, that book, Tung Fu, has now been out in the world. Are you ready for this? For 25 years. It's in 17 languages. It was a number 3 book in South Korea because it's changing the patriarchy and teaching how to speak truth to power with respect. And it never would have happened if at that moment I hadn't looked at my future and made a long-term decision on what would achieve the greatest good over time instead of just doing what was right in front of me.
Wow. 25 years. That's incredible. Holy cow. I would have guessed 15. So 25 years. My goodness. So now that we're less face to face and maybe more Zoom and digital, words, I guess, how has that changed? How have we shifted? Is Tung Fu more important, less important? All the importance of titles is more or less. What do you think?
I think that it's even more important. And this is almost a rhetorical question, right, Phil? We know the answer to that. It's Nancy F. Cohen out of Harvard did studies and found out that goldfish have longer attention spans than we do. Goldfish, 9 seconds. Human beings, 8 seconds. So the clock starts ticking the second we start talking. And I think we've got 60 seconds to prove that we're worth listening to. Richard Branson said, time is the new money. I think time is the new trust. And if people are going to trust, we're going to be a good use of their time and mind and money, we got to hit the ground running. So would you like a technique that we can use like in 60 seconds to get people's eyebrows up?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, you know how this goes. Story first. And by the way, everyone listening, if you're doing a podcast, a media interview, someone asks a question in a presentation, don't explain because that's infobesity. You go into, well, here's an example of how that works. Here's an example of how I came up with that. Because once again, the story is original and organic, gets the eyebrows up, and the lesson is embedded in the story, right? So you ask a question and I jump into a story, and then we unpack it so that other people can do it. However, they already have proof of concept and they know that it works, right? Because they've seen how it's gotten results for someone else. So I think you may know that I have served as the pitch coach for Springboard Enterprises. They've helped entrepreneurs get 26 billion in funding and valuation. So one of my Springboard clients came to me. She said, Sam, I got good news and I got bad news. I said, what's the good news? She said, I'm speaking in front of a room full of investors at the Paley Center in New York. I said, that's fantastic news. What's the bad news? She said, I'm going at 2:30 in the afternoon and I only have 10 minutes. She said, you can't say anything in 10 minutes. How am I going to talk about our financial projections, our team credentials, our business model, our exit? I said, Kathleen, you don't have 10 minutes. You have 60 seconds, right? They will have seen 16 presentations. Their eyes are going to be glazed. Phil, here is the 60-second opening that not only helped Kathleen Callender of PharmaJet get millions in funding, she was selected as Business Week's most promising social entrepreneur of that year. Ready? 60 seconds?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you know there are 1.8 billion vaccinations given every year? Did you know up to a third of those are given with reused needles? Did you know we're spreading and perpetuating the very diseases we're trying to prevent? Imagine if there was a painless one-use needle for a fraction of the current cost. We don't have to imagine it. We've created it, and she's off and running. Your eyebrows up? Okay, now let's unpack it, right? First, is that once again, we do not tell, we ask. We ask 3 did you know questions that go to the pain of the problem of that we're solving. It's the issue that we're trying to answer, the need that we're trying to meet. And now we need to come up with startling statistics. And you're thinking, well, where do I find startling statistics? If this was a workshop, we may have hundreds of people watching or listening. We could say, just get out your computer and put in search. What are startling statistics about the industry that you're in, about the problem that you're solving, about the issue that you're answering? I guarantee in seconds, you're going to come up with recent research statistics even you don't know. And if you're the expert and you haven't seen that before, probably your decision makers in your audience won't have heard it either. So do you see, ask 3 did you know questions. The next step, the word imagine. Imagine this, and this. The word imagine pulls people out of their preoccupation. They're no longer, checking their phone. They're picturing your point. They're seeing what you're saying. And now, once again, the three, because this is iambic meter, this is when you put it in a beat, you make it easy to repeat. They reference what you just said. So think about Kathleen Callender, PharmaJet. What are people thinking? Well, they're thinking about those painful inoculations, so we made it painless. They're thinking about those reused needles, so we made it one use. Most decision makers care about money, so we made it a fraction of the current cost. Do you see how in a world of wah, 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 infobesity, we composed a succinct one sentence? Who wouldn't want that? Third step. You don't have to imagine it. We're doing it. Now you come in with your precedents and your evidence to show this isn't speculative or pie in the sky. This is a done deal. And here's where it's already, here's a testimonial, here's a whatever, all in 60 seconds. Everyone else is still going like this. You have people at hello as they want to know more, which means we just got what we cared about in their mental door.
Wow. That's fantastic. And that's so simple and so doable. So, wow. So I just re-downloaded and resubscribed to your ebook, and I saw your 70 10 10 10 rule that was like that makes so much sense, and that's a kind of a spin on what you just talked about, right? As we go here, so can you explain that? Because I think in today's noisy world, we need to cut through the crap even more.
Good for you, Phil. So now you know me, and in those 17 years of Maui Writers Conference, do you know the number one takeaway? It's first, our authors didn't agree on anything. It was like Frank McCourt would say you have to write first thing in the merry morning, and Dave Barry would say, I'm a night owl. And Elizabeth George would say you have to work with an outline, and Terry Brooks would say I never work with an outline. The only thing they agreed on? Ink it when you think it. So right now, I hope people get paper and pen, so that we learn kinesthetically, and so that we are not just hearing it, or seeing it. We're actually writing it, which means we own it. We're more likely to do it. So put 4 columns on your notes right now. And Phil, do you have paper and pen in front of you?
Yep, of course.
Okay, well, let's do this, because then we can talk about a blog you're about to write. We can talk about a chapter in a book you're about to write. We can even talk about a point you want to make, and how using this 70 10 10 10 rule upends infobesity and intrigues people in the first 60 seconds. Ready to go?
Yep.
Okay, so on the column on the left, put 70, and then 10, and then 10, and then 10. And under 70, put anecdote. ANECDOTE. And now notice I didn't say story. And the reason is because some people make up their stories. They're apocryphal. And if we use made up stories, or if we use other people's stories, at some point people are thinking, if they're making this up, what else are they making up, right? So an anecdote is a real life example. We put people in the scene and we reenact it. So it's like they're right there with us. So of course I have a whole process on how we can tell an anecdote so it comes alive. However, we're going to just start anecdote. Put people in the scene, reenact what happened with dialogue. By the way, if the anecdote doesn't have dialogue, it's not an anecdote. It's just we went to Disneyland, we really had a great time. Man, it was hot, we had to wait in all those long lines. That's not a story. That's not an anecdote. Something that happened to me. You're thinking, what's that got to do with me, right? Okay, next column is A for aha. What is the aha of the anecdote? What was the revelation? What was the point? What was the lesson learned? What was the insight? Because often we can craft that insight so that we have a repeatable, retweetable phrase. That can be the title of our blog. That can be the title of our chapter. That can be the aha, where everyone sees the light, the band plays, right? Okay, and the next is ask. Is a quick story, 60 seconds, Sam, is that we had an Olympic athlete at Maui Writers Conference, and he talked about training for the games. He choked. He didn't even get out of his heat. He didn't even make it to TV in the final rounds. He was so disgusted with himself, he quit the sport. And 2 years later, he thought, I can't end my athletic career like that. So he went back into training, got on the team, and then made the medal stand. End of story. And I looked around and people were giving him polite applause. I could tell what they were thinking. Well, good for you. What's that got to do with me? Because he never hooked and hinged. At the end of every story, we ask 3 you questions. So, have you ever been in that situation? Have you ever had that happen to you? Did you ever have a goal that didn't work out? Did you throw in the towel? Did you give it another? Do you see how when we ask 3 you questions, which is a hook and a hinge, we make our story their story. Now we have, once again, a dialogue instead of a monologue. We have an interaction instead of, a narcissistic unloading, right? And then
Yep.
finally, the last is act. And now it's prescriptive. Now here's the how to, here's the next step, here's the recommendation, here's the action plan. Now, another quick little story. Several years ago, TED.com was very concerned that they were becoming a little elitist because, of course, their goal is to spread big ideas. However, the event costs more than $10,000. It always sells out. And so they rented movie theaters around the country. And for a $10 ticket, the week of Main Stage TED, you could go and see the best of the best that week. So I was in Colorado at the time. I got together 25 people. We went and we watched this TED best of, and then we went to a restaurant afterwards and we debriefed it. And so I went around and I asked everyone, okay, in under 1 minute, what was your takeaway? And do you know what they all said? Only 3 of them were actionable. See, here's Elon Musk talking about everything good for Elon Musk, right? There's nothing we can do. Here's the world's AI expert giving us good for him. Nothing we could do. There are only 3 people who said, here's how you can follow up. Here's how you can put this into practice. Here's how you can use this next time. I think we have a responsibility to do all of these 4 and in these order. Because in a world of infobesity, if we want to earn people's attention, boom, jump into that original organic story that people can relate to and identify with. Pull out that, no platitudes or cliches, that aha that lands it for them. Ask so that they're already thinking how they can put this into practice or how this is relevant for them, and then number it and name it. Here are 3 questions to ask yourself. Here are 4 things to never say. Here are 5 ways to do that. And look at the craft of that. Look at the art of that. And that's how we connect in a world of infobesity.
Wow. So which of your books, if I was looking to get better at that, if we're trying to do, get deeper at that and craft any piece of that, do you have a book on each of those, or is one of the books all about that?
Good question, Phil. Let's see. Pop goes into coming up with repeatable, retweetable memes, a phrase that pays, a unique positioning and naming, etc. Got Your Attention is about how we intrigue people in a world of infobesity. Tung Fu, of course, is what to say when we don't know what to say. So whether someone's angry or someone's blaming us for something that's not our fault, it's how we can be compassionate and kind even when other people aren't, and how we can be proactive so we find solutions instead of fault.
Cool. Well, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk just a smidge about your book, Someday Is Not a Day of the Week, because I think that's such a fun title, and it's such a true thing, right? Like, I don't know, maybe it was Brian Tracy, maybe it was somebody else, right? Someday Isle is not a place to visit. Someday is not a day of the week. So I dig that, and I think that's so important. So where did you come up with that? And tell us a little bit about the idea behind that one, please, Sam.
First, Phil, thank you for your lovely questions. I'm having fun, and I hope other people are too. And part of it is because you've really done your homework and asked such insightful questions. So thank you.
Thank you.
It's okay. So where did that book come from? I'll always be grateful to my son, Andrew, because I'd finished a very intense consult, 2-day consult, and he called and he sensed something in my voice. And he said, "What's up, Mom?" I said, "Andrew, I'm so exhausted. I don't even know if I can get on that plane tonight. I've got to fly back to DC and then fly back in 2 days to do a keynote in Silicon Valley." And he said something that changed my life, Phil. He said, "Mom, there's something about you I don't understand. You're an entrepreneur. You have your own business. You can do anything you want, and you're not taking advantage of it." Well, out of the mouths of 20 somethings, right? And so I gave away 95% of what I owned, and I took off on a year by the water. And I went to Monet's Garden with DeWitt Jones and Charles Needle, and I swam with dolphins, and I sailed the Chesapeake Bay, and I interviewed people. Are you happy? Why? And are you not happy? And if so, why? Why not? And the number one thing I heard over and over again is, well, I'm busy. I've got responsibilities, and someday I'm going to do this when I retire, when the kids go off to college, when things aren't so crazy at work. And as you know, that's a regret waiting to happen. So the book Someday is Not a Day in the Week is to remind us that, as Paulo Coelho said, one day we're going to wake up and there won't be any time left to do the things we've always wanted to do. So hopefully that book helps us get crystal clear about what we want to do, and then to have the clarity and the courage to start it now instead of later.
That's awesome. That is beautiful. I think that's a great way to wrap us up here, Sam. That's just gorgeous. I think that is so true, that we need to have that courage to do things now, which is why I've been trying to get you on the show for a long time, and I'm like, yes, finally it works. So I'm so happy for this. Folks, if you're thinking, holy crap, Sam is brilliant like I am, check her out at samhorn.com, just like it sounds. And then Sam's been kind enough to say, you know what, if you want to get more and you want to interact, connect on LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/in/samhorn. But Sam, I'm going to let you take us out here. What's the one thing that folks should be doing to get started today? What is that one action that you hope that they take as a result of listening to you?
Well, first, thank you, Phil. You know what? I just did a quote image recently about starting small is better than not starting at all. And for example, I have a writers community, because what I know from Maui Writers Conference, their number one regret is they get all fired up and they go home and life intervenes, and then they put their dreams on the shelf and they don't get around to them, and they start procrastinating, and then they feel bad and guilty and they never get back to their dream, whether it's a book or whether it's a podcast or whether it's whatever. So what we do in that writers community is we do something called, pilots call it hangar flying. They love flying so much. If they can't be up in the air, they're down in the hangar talking about being up in the air. And what I know is when you hang out with other writers, when you hear their stories, when you hear how rewarding it is to get their book out in the world, when you hear a shortcut that they had where you've been stuck, etc., that it primes the pump. So what I am suggesting to people is what do you want to accomplish by the end of the year, and what do you want to accomplish next year? And are you hanging out with people who are doing it and who have done it? Because then you get to jump on the bandwagon of their confidence. You get to jump on the bandwagon of their success stories. And that will encourage you and animate and energize you in a way that will never happen if you're trying to do it on your own.
Awesome. Great insight there. Great opportunity to get more involved with you and to get started on our dreams. Some days, not a day of the week. Friends, listen to Sam, follow Sam, and read her books. They're fantastic. And Sam, you're awesome. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I so appreciate it.
You're welcome, Phil. It's Catherine Graham of the Washington Post said, to do what you love and feel that it matters. How could anything be more fun? This is what we get to do, right? What we love, absolutely. Feel it matters with people we enjoy and respect. I don't know if it gets much better than that.
Yeah, it sure doesn't. Thank you, Sam. I appreciate you.